The moment Clarissa Bennett touched the earth with her bare fingertips and closed her eyes, every rancher within 50 miles knew what she would say before the words left her lips. And on this scorching July morning in 1882, the pronouncement that fell from her mouth would change everything for the cowboy who had ridden 3 days straight just to hear it. "Rain in 4 days," she said, her voice steady as stone. "It will start at dawn and last through the next morning, heavy enough to fill your cattle tanks and save what is left of your corn." Grayson Blackwell removed his hat and held it against his chest, watching her rise from the cracked ground behind the general store in Red Cloud, Nebraska. He had heard about Clarissa Bennett from men who swore by her predictions more than they trusted their own eyes when looking at the sky. Old-timers claimed she had never been wrong. Not once in the 7 years since she had arrived in town as a young woman of 18 with nothing but a worn carpetbag and a gift that defied explanation. "You are certain?" Grayson asked, his throat dry from the ride and from something else he could not quite name. She was younger than he expected, perhaps 25 now, with dark hair that caught the sunlight in shades of copper and brown. Her dress was simple calico, faded from too many washings, but her eyes held an intensity that made him forget about the dying cattle on his ranch. "I have never been uncertain about the rain," Clarissa said, brushing the red Nebraska dust from her hands. "You can trust what I tell you, or you can trust the empty sky. Most men choose wrong the first time." Grayson looked up at the cloudless expanse of blue that had mocked him for 6 weeks straight. His cattle were dying. His hands were talking about moving onto ranches where the water still ran in the creeks. He had inherited the Bar B ranch from his father 2 years ago, and now at 28 he was watching everything his family had built turn to dust. "I will trust you," he said, meeting her eyes. "What do I owe you for this?" "Nothing," Clarissa said. "I do not take money for telling people what the earth tells me." "Then how do you live?" She smiled for the first time, and it transformed her serious face into something that made Grayson's heart kick hard against his ribs. "I work at the hotel. I clean rooms and wash linens. The rain predictions are not for profit. They are just what I do." Grayson wanted to ask her how she knew, what magic or science let her feel the weather in the ground, but the words tangled on his tongue. Instead, he said, "Can I buy you lunch? To thank you for riding out here to tell me." "I walked," Clarissa said, "and I came out here to check the earth for myself, not because you asked. But yes, you can buy me lunch if you are offering." They walked together down the main street of Red Cloud, past the saloon where piano music drifted out into the heat, past the bank and the land office, and the small white church that held services every Sunday. People nodded to Clarissa as they passed, and Grayson noticed how they looked at her with a mixture of respect and something close to fear. The restaurant was nearly empty in the mid-afternoon lull. They sat by the window, and Grayson ordered roast beef and potatoes for both of them, along with cold tea that came in glasses beaded with condensation. "How long have you been ranching?" Clarissa asked, her hands folded on the checkered tablecloth. "All my life," Grayson said. "My father started the Bar B in 1869, right after he came back from the war. He built it up from nothing. 200 head of cattle now, good grazing land when there's rain to make the grass grow. And now you are losing it." "Now I am losing it," he agreed. "If the rain does not come, I will have to sell. Maybe get work as a hired hand somewhere. Start over." Clarissa was quiet for a moment, her eyes distant. "The rain will come," she said. "You do not need to worry about that." "How can you be so sure?" She looked at him directly, and he felt pinned by that gaze. "I feel it the way you feel hunger or cold. It is part of me. The earth speaks in a language most people have forgotten, but I never lost it. When I touch the ground, I can feel the moisture deep below, the way the air currents move, the pressure that builds and releases. I cannot explain it better than that." The food arrived, and they ate in companionable silence for a while. Grayson found himself stealing glances at her between bites, noting the graceful way she moved, the serious concentration she brought even to the simple act of eating. "Where did you come from before Red Cloud?" he asked. "Iowa," Clarissa said. A farm outside of Council Bluffs. My parents died of fever when I was 17, both within a week of each other. I had no other family, so I sold the farm and came west. I'd heard Nebraska was a place where a person could start fresh. And the rain prediction? You could do that in Iowa too? I always could, she said, even as a child. My mother understood, but my father thought it was foolishness. He would get angry when I told him to harvest early because rain was coming or to wait another day to plant because the ground was not ready. But I was always right, and eventually he stopped fighting it. Grayson leaned back in his chair, studying her. Why work at a hotel when you could charge good money for what you know? Ranchers would pay a fortune for accurate weather predictions. Clarissa set down her fork with more force than necessary, because the gift is not mine to sell. It comes from the earth, and the earth does not ask for payment. I will not profit from something that should be freely shared. That is admirable, Grayson said, meaning it. But it does not seem fair that you should scrub floors while men build fortunes on the information you give them. Life is rarely fair, Clarissa said. I learned that when I buried my parents, but I have a roof over my head and food to eat. That is more than many can say. They finished their meal, and Grayson paid the bill. Outside, the heat hit them like a physical force, the afternoon sun turning the street into a furnace. I should get back to the hotel, Clarissa said. I have the evening shift. Can I see you again? The words came out before Grayson could stop them, and he felt his face heat in a way that had nothing to do with the weather. Clarissa looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Why? Because I would like to, Grayson said, because I find you interesting, because I have not met anyone like you before. You want to see me because I can predict the rain, she said, and there was an edge to her voice. No, Grayson said firmly. I want to see you because when you smile, my heart forgets how to beat properly. The rain prediction just happened to be how we met. Clarissa's expression softened. I finish work at 7. If you want to walk with me after that, you can. Grayson felt something ease in his chest. I will be there. He watched her walk away down the street, her blue calico dress moving in the faint breeze that offered no relief from the heat. Then he mounted his horse and rode back to the Bar B, his mind full of dark hair and knowing eyes and the promise of rain in 4 days. His ranch hands were waiting for him when he arrived, their faces grim. Tom Fletcher, his foreman, a weathered man of 40 with gray threading through his brown beard, met him at the barn. Well, Tom asked, what did she say? Rain in 4 days, Gwan? Grayson said, dismounting. Heavy enough to make a difference. Tom let out a breath. You believe her? I do, Grayson said. Everyone says she has never been wrong. Everyone also says the earth cannot talk to people, Tom said. But I have seen stranger things. I will tell the men to hold on a little longer. Grayson spent the rest of the afternoon checking on his cattle, riding through his land, and assessing the damage. He had already lost 20 head, and more were in bad shape. The creek that normally ran through his property was a dry bed of cracked mud. His water tanks were nearly empty. 4 days seemed like an eternity. But when he thought about Clarissa Bennett, about the certainty in her voice, and the promise he would see her again that evening, the time seemed suddenly too short. He rode back to town as the sun was setting, washing the dust from his face and hands at the pump behind the hotel before walking around to the front entrance. Clarissa emerged at 7 exactly, wearing the same blue dress but with her hair now pinned up in a way that showed the curve of her neck. You came, she said, and he could hear the surprise in her voice. I said I would. They walked together through the town as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared. The heat had broken slightly with the darkness, and a faint breeze carried the scent of the prairie grass that surrounded Red Cloud. Tell me about your ranch, Clarissa said. What is it like when there is rain? Grayson talked about the Bar B, about the way the grass grew thick and green in the spring, about the sound of the creek running full and fast after a storm, about the satisfaction of watching his cattle grow fat and healthy. He talked about his father, who had been a hard man but a fair one, who had taught him everything about ranching and nothing about how to handle loss. "He died 3 years ago," Grayson said. "Heart gave out one morning while he was saddling his horse. He was there, and then he was not. My mother had died when I was born, so it was just the two of us my whole life. The ranch is all I have of him now." "I am sorry," Clarissa said softly. "Losing a parent is losing part of yourself." "You understand?" "I do." They reached the edge of town, where the buildings gave way to open prairie. The stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by any city lights. Grayson could see the dark line of the horizon stretching away in all directions, could feel the vastness of the land around them. "Do you ever want to leave?" he asked. "Just go somewhere with more opportunities, maybe a bigger city?" "No," Clarissa said. "The earth speaks more clearly here. In the cities, there is too much noise, too much interference. I can still feel the rain coming, but it is like trying to hear a whisper in a crowded room. Here, it is clear." "So you will stay in Red Cloud?" "For now," she said, "unless something changes." They stood together in the darkness, and Grayson felt the space between them like a physical thing charged with possibility. He wanted to reach for her hand, to close that distance, but he held back. "I should walk you back," he said instead. "It is getting late." They turned and headed back toward the hotel, their pace slower than before. At the entrance, Clarissa paused. "Thank you for dinner," she said, "and for the walk. Can I see you again tomorrow?" "I work until 7 again. Then I will be here at 7. Clarissa smiled that transforming smile again, and Grayson rode back to his ranch feeling lighter than he had in weeks. The next 3 days fell into a pattern. Grayson worked his ranch during the day, pushing his cattle to the few remaining patches of decent grass, rationing the water that was left. Each evening he rode into town and met Clarissa when she finished her shift at the hotel. They walked together, sometimes through the town, sometimes out onto the prairie, talking about everything and nothing. He learned that she loved books, that she read every novel she could get her hands from the small lending library in the church basement. She learned that he had wanted to be a teacher when he was young, that he had a facility with numbers and letters that seemed wasted on ranch work. They discovered they both preferred coffee to tea, that they both found comfort in thunderstorms, that they both sometimes felt lonely in ways they could not quite articulate. On the third evening, as they sat on a bench outside the church watching the sunset, Grayson finally reached for her hand. Clarissa let him take it, her fingers curling into his. "The rain will come tomorrow," she said quietly, "just as I told you." "I know," Grayson said. "I trust you." "Do you trust me because you want the rain to save your ranch, or because you believe in me?" "Both," he said honestly. "Is that wrong?" "No," Clarissa said. "It is human. But Grayson, I need you to understand something. People have wanted things from me my whole life. They want rain predictions, they want certainty, they want me to make their decisions easier. But I'm not just this gift. I am a woman with hopes and fears and dreams of my own. If you want to keep seeing me, I need to know that you see all of me, not just the part that can tell you when storms are coming." Grayson turned to face her fully, still holding her hand. "I see you," he said. "I see a woman who is kind enough to share a gift freely, who is strong enough to make her own way in the world, who reads novels and thinks deeply and has eyes that make me forget everything else. The rain prediction brought me to you, but it is not why I keep coming back." Clarissa looked at him for a long moment, and then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was gentle and tentative, a question more than a declaration, but Grayson felt it through his entire body like lightning. When she pulled back, she said, "The rain starts at dawn. You should probably be at your ranch to see it." "I would rather be here," Grayson said. "You can come back after," she said, and there was promise in her voice. He did not want to leave, but he knew she was right. He had cattle to tend, water tanks to position, preparations to make. So he kissed her once more, trying to pour everything he felt into that moment, and then he mounted his horse and rode through the darkness back to the Bar B. Tom Fletcher was waiting for him, leaning against the barn with his arms crossed. "Tomorrow morning," Grayson said as she promised. I hope she's right, Tom said. We lost 3 more head today. We cannot take much more of this. She is right, Grayson said with absolute certainty. I would bet my life on it. He barely slept that night, lying in his bed, listening to the silence outside. The air felt different somehow, heavier, charged with anticipation. He rose before dawn and dressed quickly, then walked out onto the porch of the ranch house. The sky was still dark, stars fading as the first hint of light touched the eastern horizon. Grayson stood there, waiting, his heart beating hard in his chest. And then just as the sun began to rise, he felt it. A single drop of water hit his forehead, cool and shocking. Then another, and suddenly the sky opened up and rain poured down in sheets, soaking him through in seconds. Tom Fletcher came running out of the bunkhouse, shouting in joy. The other hands followed, all of them standing in the downpour with their faces turned up to the sky, laughing like children. The rain drummed on the roof of the barn, turned the dusty yard to mud, filled the empty water tanks with sweet, life-giving water. Grayson stood in the rain and thought about Clarissa Bennett, about her hands pressed to the earth and the certainty in her voice. She had been right. She had saved his ranch, saved everything his father had built. But more than that, she had given him something he had not expected to find, a reason to believe in things that could not be explained by logic or science. The rain continued through the morning, just as she had predicted, heavy and steady. By afternoon, the creek was running again, and the grass was already beginning to look greener. The cattle drank deeply from the refilled tanks, and Grayson could see life returning to them with every passing hour. When the rain finally stopped the next morning, leaving the world washed clean and smelling of wet earth, Grayson saddled his horse and rode to town. He found Clarissa outside the hotel, standing in a patch of sunlight with her face turned up to the sky. You were right, he said, dismounting. I know, she said, but there was no arrogance in it, just quiet confidence. You saved everything. The Bar B, my cattle, my future. The rain saved those things, Clarissa said. I just told you when it would come. Grayson closed the distance between them and took both her hands in his. Come out to the ranch, he said. Let me show you what you helped save. Spend the day with me. Clarissa hesitated. I have to work. Tell them you are ill. Tell them you need a day, please. She studied his face, and whatever she saw there made her decide. All right, she said, let me tell Mrs. Henderson, and then we can go. They rode together on Grayson's horse, Clarissa sitting in front of him with his arms around her to hold the reins. The prairie looked transformed after the rain, the brown grass showing hints of green, wildflowers beginning to bloom in unexpected patches of color. When they reached the Bar B, Tom Fletcher grinned at them and tipped his hat to Clarissa. Madam, he said, you are a miracle worker. The boss here has not stopped smiling since the rain started. The earth did the work, Clarissa said. I just listened. Grayson showed her around the ranch, introducing her to his hands, letting her see the cattle growing stronger by the hour, walking her along the creek that now ran full and fast. They ate lunch in the ranch house, simple food that Grayson cooked himself, and afterward they sat on the porch and watched the clouds move across the sky. Do you see them differently than I do? Grayson asked. The clouds? I see what they mean, Clarissa said. Not just what they look like. Those clouds there, the ones that look like cotton pulled apart, they mean fair weather for several days. The rain we just had came from clouds that were heavy and dark, full of promise. But it is not just the clouds. It is everything together. The wind, the pressure in the air, the feel of the ground beneath my feet. Can you teach someone else to do it? I do not know, she said. I have never tried. It has always just been part of me. They sat in silence for a while, comfortable with each other in a way that usually took much longer to develop. Grayson felt like he had known her for years instead of days, like she was a piece of his life that had been missing and had finally fallen into place. "I am falling in love with you," he said suddenly, the words coming out unbidden but feeling absolutely right. Clarissa turned to look at him, her eyes wide. "That is fast." "I know, but it is true. You barely know me." "I know enough," Grayson said. "I know you are honest and kind and strong. I know you make me want to be better. I know that when I am with you, everything else makes sense." Clarissa was quiet for a long moment, and Grayson felt fear claw at his throat. He had said too much, pushed too hard, ruined the fragile thing building between them. But then she said, I am falling in love with you too. And it terrifies me." "Why?" "Because I have never let anyone close before. I have always kept people at a distance because they want things from me that I cannot give, or because they are afraid of what I can do. You are the first person who has ever looked at me like I am just a woman, not a freak or a fortune teller or a commodity." Grayson reached out and cupped her face in his hand. "You are the most extraordinary woman I have ever met. But yes, you are also just a woman I want to spend every day with if you will let me." Clarissa leaned into his touch, and then she kissed him again, deeper this time, with more certainty. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, she said, "I do not want to rush this. I want to be sure." "Take all the time you need," Grayson said. "I'm not going anywhere." Over the following weeks, Grayson courted Clarissa properly. He took her to church socials and town dances, bought her flowers when the prairie blooms were in season, read books she recommended, and discussed them with her over dinners at the restaurant. She came out to the ranch on her days off, learning to ride his gentler horses, helping him with small tasks, becoming part of the rhythm of his life. The town of Red Cloud watched their courtship with great interest. Some people were happy for Clarissa, glad to see her find companionship. Others muttered about ranch owners who got above themselves, or about the strangeness of a woman who claimed to hear the earth speak. But Grayson and Clarissa paid no attention to the gossip, focused only on each other. In late August, another drought threatened. The sky stayed clear for 3 weeks, and the water levels began to drop again. Ranchers came to Clarissa asking her to check the earth, to tell them when relief would come. Grayson was there when she knelt in the dirt behind the general store, her hands pressed flat to the ground, her eyes closed in concentration. He waited, patient, as the other ranchers fidgeted nervously. When Clarissa opened her eyes, she looked troubled. "The rain is coming," she said, "but not for 2 weeks, and when it comes, it will be violent. You need to prepare. Secure anything that can blow away. Move your cattle to high ground if you have it. Make sure your buildings are sound." "How violent?" one of the ranchers asked. "Storm winds," Clarissa said. "Lightning. It will be dangerous, but it will also bring the water you need." The men dispersed, muttering among themselves, already planning. Grayson stayed behind with Clarissa. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I am tired," she said. "Reading the earth takes something out of me. It is not painful, but it is draining." "Come back to the ranch," Grayson said. "Rest there. I will take care of you." Clarissa nodded, and they rode together back to the Bar B. She slept most of the afternoon in Grayson's bed while he worked, and when she woke, she seemed restored. "Thank you," she said, finding him in the kitchen where he was making coffee. "Always," he said. That evening, as they sat together on the porch watching the sunset, Clarissa said, "I have been thinking about the future." "What about it?" "About what I want. I've spent 7 years in Red Cloud working at the hotel, living alone, keeping myself apart. I never let myself imagine anything different. But now I find myself imagining things." "What kind of thing?" Grayson asked, his heart speeding up. "A home," Clarissa said. "A partner. Maybe children someday. A life that is more than just work and rain predictions and loneliness." "You could have all of that," Grayson said carefully. "If you wanted." "With you?" "If you wanted," he repeated. Clarissa turned to face him fully. "I want. But Grayson, You need to understand what you would be getting. I cannot stop being what I am. People will always come to me for rain predictions. There will always be times when I need to press my hands to the earth and listen. Can you live with that? Can you share me with this gift? The gift is part of you, Grayson said. I would not want you to be any different than you are. And yes, I can live with sharing you, as long as I get to have you at all. Then ask me, Clarissa said softly. Grayson felt his throat tighten. He was not prepared for this, had no ring, no pretty speech planned. But the moment was perfect anyway, with the sun setting fire to the western sky and this extraordinary woman looking at him with love in her eyes. He slid from his chair and knelt beside her. Clarissa Bennett, will you marry me? Will you come be my wife, my partner, the woman I trust more than the sky itself? Yes, she said, and there were tears on her cheeks. Yes, I will marry you. Grayson pulled her into his arms and kissed her, and the world narrowed down to just the two of them, just this moment of perfect happiness. They were married in September, just before the big storm Clarissa had predicted. The ceremony was simple, held in the white church in Red Cloud, with Tom Fletcher standing as best man and Mrs. Henderson from the hotel standing up for Clarissa. Clarissa wore a new dress she had sewn herself, white cotton with lace at the collar, and Grayson wore his best suit, his hair slicked back and his boots polished to a shine. The whole town came to the wedding, and if some people still whispered about strangeness and impropriety, they were drowned out by those who wished the couple well. After the ceremony, there was a reception at the hotel with cake and music and dancing. Grayson held Clarissa in his arms as they waltzed to a tune played on a slightly out-of-tune piano, and he felt complete in a way he had never experienced before. That night, they consummated their marriage in the ranch house that was now Clarissa's home too. Grayson was gentle with her, taking his time, discovering the curves and planes of her body like a map to new territory. Clarissa was nervous but eager, and their lovemaking was tender and passionate, and left them both breathless. I love you, Grayson said afterward, holding her against his chest. I will love you every day for the rest of my life. I love you too, Clarissa whispered, more than I ever thought possible. The storm came 3 days later, exactly as Clarissa had predicted. The winds were ferocious, tearing at the buildings and bending the trees nearly double. Lightning cracked across the sky in brilliant displays, and the rain came down in torrents that turned the ground to mud. But Grayson had prepared based on Clarissa's warning. The cattle were in a protected valley, the barn was reinforced, everything loose was tied down or brought inside. They weathered the storm together in the ranch house. Clarissa pressed against Grayson as the walls shook and the wind howled. When it finally passed, leaving destruction in its wake, but also the blessed rain, Grayson looked at his wife and said, You saved us again. We saved us, Clarissa corrected. You did the work. I just told you what was coming. But Grayson knew better. Without her gift and her certainty, he would have lost everything. The Bar B would have been destroyed by the storm, his cattle killed, his livelihood erased. Instead, he had a thriving ranch and a wife he loved beyond measure. Life settled into a new rhythm. Clarissa stopped working at the hotel, instead focusing on being a rancher's wife. She learned to cook meals for the hands, to keep the accounts for the ranch, to garden and preserve food, and do 100 other tasks that kept the Bar B running smoothly. But she never stopped listening to the earth, never stopped offering rain predictions to anyone who asked. Grayson watched her grow into her role, watched her blossom with the security and love he offered. She smiled more, laughed more, seemed to carry herself with a new confidence. And he found himself grateful every single day that he had ridden to Red Cloud that scorching July morning to hear what the Earth Woman had to say. In the winter of their first year of marriage, Clarissa came to him with news that made his heart soar. I am pregnant, she said, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. We are going to have a child. Grayson whooped with joy and lifted her off her feet, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop. "A child," he said, setting her down gently. "Our child." "Are you happy?" "I am the happiest man in Nebraska," Grayson said, "maybe in the whole country." The pregnancy was difficult at times. Clarissa was sick in the mornings for weeks, and as her belly grew, she found it harder to do the physical work around the ranch, but she never complained, and she never stopped being able to read the earth. If anything, her predictions became even more accurate during those months, as if the child growing inside her strengthened her connection to the land. In July of 1883, exactly 1 year after Grayson had first met her, Clarissa went into labor. It was a long, hard birth that left Grayson pacing the floor of the ranch house, terrified and helpless. Tom Fletcher and Mrs. Henderson, who had come out to help with the delivery, tried to reassure him, but he could hear Clarissa's cries of pain through the bedroom door, and it tore at him. Finally, after 14 hours, he heard a different cry, the thin, wailing voice of a newborn baby. Mrs. Henderson opened the door, smiling broadly. "You have a son," she said, "a healthy boy. And your wife is fine, just tired." Grayson rushed into the room. Clarissa lay in the bed, her hair plastered to her head with sweat, her face pale with exhaustion, but she was smiling, and in her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Come meet your son," she said. Grayson approached slowly, almost afraid to look, but when he saw the baby's face, red and wrinkled and perfect, something in his chest cracked open and let in more love than he had known he was capable of feeling. "He is beautiful," Grayson said, his voice rough. "You are both beautiful." "We should name him," Clarissa said. "What do you think of Grant? After your father?" Grayson's eyes filled with tears. His father's name had been Gerald, but his middle name had been Grant. "Grant Blackwell," he said. "It is perfect." They raised Grant together, marveling at every milestone. His first smile, his first word, his first steps across the rough wooden floor of the ranch house. Clarissa proved to be a devoted mother, patient and loving, but also firm when needed. Grayson found joy in teaching his son about the ranch, showing him the cattle and the horses even when Grant was too young to understand. And Clarissa continued to predict the rain. She would take Grant with her sometimes when she went to check the earth, letting the baby feel the dirt between his tiny fingers. Grayson wondered if his son would inherit his mother's gift, if someday Grant would be able to feel the weather the way Clarissa did. When Grant was 2 years old, another drought threatened Nebraska. This one was worse than the one that had brought Grayson to Clarissa in the first place. The summer of 1885 was brutal, with temperatures soaring over 100 degrees day after day and not a cloud in the sky. Ranchers were desperate, and they came to the Barbie in droves, begging Clarissa to tell them when the rain would come. She checked the earth over and over, and each time she stood with a troubled expression. "I cannot feel it," she told Grayson one night as they lay in bed. "I can feel the dryness, the thirst of the land, but I cannot feel any rain coming. It is like looking into darkness and seeing nothing." "What does that mean?" Grayson asked, fear creeping into his voice. "I do not know," Clarissa said. "It has never happened before. The earth has always spoken to me. But now it is silent about the rain, and I do not understand why." The next morning, Clarissa checked the earth again. This time, when she pressed her hands to the ground, she gasped, and her eyes flew open. "What is it?" Grayson asked, crouching beside her. "Fire," she said. "There is fire coming. A prairie fire driven by wind. It will come from the west in 3 days." The color drained from Grayson's face. Prairie fires were deadly, capable of consuming everything in their path. Livestock, buildings, people, all could be lost to the flames. "Are you certain?" "I am certain," Clarissa said. "We need to warn everyone. We need to prepare." Grayson and Tom Fletcher rode through the area, warning every ranch and farm they could reach. Some people believed them immediately, trusting in Clarissa's gift. Others were skeptical, not understanding how she could predict fire the way she predicted rain, but most people took precautions anyway, not willing to risk their lives and livelihoods. At the Bar B, they created fire breaks, burning away the grass in wide strips around the ranch buildings. They filled every container with water, soaked blankets and canvas tarps, moved the cattle as far east as they could. Clarissa packed bags with essential belongings, preparing for the possibility that they might have to flee. On the third day, the fire came. They could see the smoke first, a dark smudge on the western horizon that grew larger and darker as the day progressed. By afternoon, they could see the flames themselves, a wall of orange and red that stretched from horizon to horizon, consuming the prairie grass in great, hungry gulps. The wind pushed the fire eastward, and Grayson watched it come with his heart in his throat. Clarissa stood beside him, holding Grant in her arms, her face set and determined. "It will reach us," she said, "but it will turn. I can feel it now. The wind is going to shift, push the fire south of us. We will be all right." "How can you know that?" Grayson asked. "I can feel it in the air, the way the pressure is building. Trust me." And he did. He had always trusted her, from that first moment when she had predicted rain in 4 days. So he held his position, refused to evacuate, kept his men at the ranch despite their fear. The fire came within half a mile of the Bar B, close enough that they could feel the heat of it, could hear the roar of the flames. The smoke was thick and choking, and Clarissa held a wet cloth over Grant's face to help him breathe. Grayson and his men stood ready with their wet blankets and buckets of water, prepared to fight if the flames reached them. And then, just as Clarissa had predicted, the wind shifted. It came from the north, suddenly strong and steady, pushing the fire south. The wall of flame veered away from the Bar B, moving off toward empty prairie where there was nothing to destroy. By evening, the fire had passed, leaving a blackened landscape in its wake, but leaving the Bar B untouched. Grayson's neighbors had not all been so lucky. 2 ranches to the south had been destroyed, though thankfully no lives were lost. The people who had heeded the warning and evacuated returned to find ashes, but they were alive. That night, as they lay in bed with Grant sleeping in his cradle nearby, Grayson held Clarissa close. "You saved us again," he said. "If you had not felt the fire coming, if you had not been able to predict the wind shift, we would have lost everything." "I am just glad I could still feel it," Clarissa said. "When I could not feel the rain, I was afraid my gift was leaving me." "Maybe the earth knows we need the fire prediction more than the rain prediction right now," Grayson suggested. "Maybe," Clarissa said. "Or maybe the gift is changing, growing. I do not pretend to understand it, I just use it the best I can." The drought finally broke in September, when a series of storms moved through Nebraska, bringing blessed rain that quenched the thirsty land. Clarissa had felt them coming 3 days in advance, and the relief on her face when she announced the rain was palpable. Life continued at the Bar B, marked by the rhythms of ranching and the seasons. Grant grew into a bright, curious boy who loved the ranch and the animals and his parents with equal fervor. When he was 4, Clarissa became pregnant again, and this time the pregnancy was easier. In the spring of 1887, she gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine, after Clarissa's mother. Catherine had her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes, and from the moment she was born, she seemed to observe the world with an intensity that reminded Grayson of Clarissa. They were a family now, complete and happy. The Bar B prospered under Grayson's careful management and Clarissa's accurate predictions. They added to their land, increased their herd, built a new barn, and expanded the ranch house to accommodate their growing family. But the most remarkable thing was that Grant did indeed inherit his mother's gift. When he was 6 years old, he came running to his parents one morning, his face alight with excitement. "Mama, Papa, I can feel it," he said. "I can feel the rain coming. It is going to rain tomorrow in the afternoon." Clarissa knelt beside him, taking his hands. "Are you certain?" "I pressed my hands to the ground like you do, and I could feel it. The earth was telling me about the water coming." Clarissa looked up at Grayson, and there were tears in her eyes. "He has the gift," she said. "Our son has the gift." Grant's prediction was correct. It rained the next afternoon, a gentle shower that lasted about an hour. And from that day forward, Grant worked with his mother, learning to refine his ability to distinguish between different types of weather, to feel not just rain, but wind and temperature changes, and the subtle shifts in the earth that preceded all kinds of weather events. Catherine did not have the gift, but she did not seem to mind. She was a practical, grounded child who loved helping her father with the ranch work and learning to ride horses and roping cattle with a skill that impressed even Tom Fletcher. The years passed peacefully. The Bar B continued to thrive, and Grayson and Clarissa's marriage deepened and strengthened. They had their disagreements, of course, moments of frustration or misunderstanding, but they always worked through them, committed to each other and to the life they had built together. In 1890, when Grant was 7 and Catherine was 3, Clarissa became pregnant again. This pregnancy was harder than the previous two, and Grayson worried about her. She was 33 now, and childbirth was always dangerous, especially as women got older. But Clarissa was confident. "I can feel it," she said, her hand on her swollen belly. "This child is meant to be here. Everything will be fine." And she was right. In the late fall, she gave birth to another son, whom they named George. George was a calm, easy baby who seemed content to watch the world from his mother's arms. As he grew, it became clear that he had neither the weather gift nor Catherine's practical ranching skills, but he had a gift for music that delighted everyone. By the time he was 4, he could play simple tunes on the piano they had bought and installed in the ranch house parlor. The family was complete. 3 children, a thriving ranch, a marriage built on love and trust and mutual respect. Grayson sometimes looked at his life and could barely believe how blessed he was. He had come so close to losing everything in that drought of 1882, and instead he had found Clarissa and built a life beyond anything he had imagined. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Grayson took Clarissa back to Red Cloud, to the spot behind the general store where he had first watched her press her hands to the earth. "This is where it started," he said. "This is where you told me rain would come and I decided to trust you." "You decided to trust the earth," Clarissa said. "I was just the messenger." "No," Grayson said. "I trusted you. I still trust you more than I trust the sky, more than I trust my own eyes. You have never led me wrong." Clarissa leaned into him, and they stood together in the place where their story had begun, comfortable in the silence that existed between people who knew each other completely. "I never thought I would have this," Clarissa said softly. "A husband, children, a home. I thought I would always be alone, always be the strange woman people came to for predictions but never got close to. You changed that. You saw me as a person, not just a gift." "You are the most important person in my life," Grayson said. "You and our children. The ranch, the cattle, all of it is just things. You are what matters." They kissed in the spot where they had met, and it felt like coming full circle, like closing a loop that had begun 8 years earlier. As the years continued to pass, Grant's weather sense grew stronger. By the time he was 12, he was as accurate as his mother, able to predict not just rain, but storms, temperature changes, wind patterns, and dozens of other weather phenomena. Clarissa was proud of him, but she also warned him about the burden that came with the gift. "People will want things from you," she told him. "They will want certainty in an uncertain world. You must remember that you are more than just your ability to predict weather. You are a person with your own dreams and desires, and you should never let the gift consume you." Grant listened seriously, as he always did when his mother spoke about important things. "I will not forget," he promised. Catherine grew into a strong, capable young woman who could outride and outrope most of the ranch hands. She had no interest in marriage, she declared when she was 15, much preferring the company of horses to the company of young men. Grayson and Clarissa did not push her, trusting that she would find her own path in her own time. George remained musical, spending hours at the piano working out increasingly complex melodies. He talked about going to a music conservatory someday, studying formally, maybe becoming a teacher or a performer. Grayson and Clarissa encouraged him, wanting all their children to pursue their passions. In 1898, Tom Fletcher retired from his position as foreman, his body finally worn down by decades of hard ranch work. Grant, now 15 and already skilled at both weather prediction and ranching, stepped into the role. He was young for such responsibility, but he had grown up on the Bar B, knew every inch of the land, and commanded respect from the other hands despite his age. Grayson was 44 now, his dark hair showing threads of gray, lines forming around his eyes from years of squinting into the prairie sun. But he was still strong, still vital, still deeply in love with his wife. Clarissa was 41, her beauty now mature and refined rather than youthful, but no less striking. She still predicted weather for anyone who asked, and she and Grant together had become legendary throughout Nebraska for their accuracy. One evening in the summer of 1898, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Clarissa said, "Do you ever regret it? Marrying me, taking on all that came with my gift?" Grayson looked at her in surprise. "Never. Not for a single moment. Why would you ask that?" "Because it has not always been easy. People have treated you differently because of me. Some have been jealous of your success, attributing it to my predictions rather than your hard work. Some have thought you were strange for believing in what I can do." "I do not care what anyone else thinks," Grayson said firmly. "You are my wife, the mother of my children, my partner in everything. The gift is part of you, and I love all of you. If people want to think I am strange, let them. I have everything that matters right here." Clarissa smiled, that transforming smile he had first seen 16 years ago. "I love you," she said, "more now than I did the day we married." "I love you too," Grayson said, "always." In 1900, as the new century began, Catherine surprised everyone by announcing that she was courting a young man from a neighboring ranch. His name was Thomas, and he was a quiet, steady fellow who shared Catherine's love of horses and ranch work. Grayson liked him immediately, recognizing in the young man the same qualities he valued in himself: honesty, hard work, loyalty. Catherine and Thomas were married in the spring of 1901, in the same church where Grayson and Clarissa had wed 18 years earlier. It was a joyful celebration, and Grayson found himself tearing up as he walked his daughter down the aisle, remembering the tiny baby she had been, the fierce girl she had grown into, the strong woman she had become. George left for music school in Chicago that same year, his talent having earned him a scholarship to a prestigious conservatory. It was hard to let him go, to send their youngest child off into the world, but Grayson and Clarissa knew it was right. George needed to pursue his passion, to see what he could become. That left Grant, who was now 18 and fully capable of running the Bar B on his own. He had no desire to leave Nebraska, perfectly content to continue the family ranching business and use his weather gift to help the community. Grayson began to step back, letting his son take more and more of the leadership, preparing for the day when Grant would inherit the ranch. In 1903, when Grayson was 49 and Clarissa was 46, they decided to take a trip. They had never been anywhere beyond Nebraska, had spent their entire married life focused on the ranch and the children. But now, with Grant capable of managing things and both Catherine and George settled in their own lives, they had the freedom to explore. They took the train to California, spending a month traveling up and down the coast, seeing the ocean for the first time, exploring cities and forests and mountains. It was a revelation to both of them, experiencing landscapes so different from the Nebraska prairie they knew so well. "Can you still feel the weather here?" Grayson asked one day, as they stood on a beach watching the waves crash against the shore. Clarissa was quiet for a moment, her bare feet in the sand, her eyes closed. "Yes," she said, "but it is different. The ocean makes everything more complex, more layered. I can feel rain coming, but there are so many other factors here. It is harder to interpret." "Do you like it?" "I find it interesting," Clarissa said, "but I prefer Nebraska. The earth speaks more clearly there." They returned home in the early summer, tanned and happy, full of stories about their adventures. Grant had managed the ranch perfectly in their absence, and Grayson felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that the Bar B would continue to thrive when he was gone. But he was not planning on being gone anytime soon. He still had years ahead of him, years to spend with Clarissa, to watch his grandchildren grow up, to see what the future would bring. In 1905, Catherine gave birth to Grayson and Clarissa's first grandchild, a girl named Clara after Clarissa. Holding his granddaughter for the first time, feeling her tiny weight in his arms, Grayson felt the circle of life completing itself in the most beautiful way. "Your grandmother has a gift," he told the baby, even though she was too young to understand. "She can feel the weather in the earth, and because of her we have all of this. The ranch, the family, the life we have built. Remember that when you are older. Remember that love and trust and believing in things that cannot always be explained are what make life worth living." Clarissa, watching from her bed where she was recovering from the birth of her granddaughter, had tears streaming down her face. "Why are you crying?" Grayson asked, bringing the baby to her. "Because I am happy," Clarissa said. "Because I have more than I ever dreamed possible. Because I found you, and you trusted me, and everything grew from that trust." Grayson sat beside her on the bed, the baby between them, and they looked at their granddaughter with wonder. "I will always trust you," Grayson said, "more than the sky, more than anything." Grant married a year later, choosing a woman from Red Cloud named Sarah, who was practical and kind, and who accepted Grant's weather gift without question. They moved into a house on the Bar B property, planning to raise their own family there and continue the ranching tradition. George finished his music studies and became a teacher at a music school in Omaha, happy and fulfilled in his chosen career. He visited often, bringing new songs he had written, filling the ranch house with music during his stays. The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and new challenges. There were more grandchildren. Grant and Sarah had 3 children. Catherine and Thomas had 4, and the Bar B expanded to accommodate the growing family. Grayson and Clarissa moved into a smaller house on the property, giving the main ranch house to Grant and his family, comfortable in their semi-retirement. Clarissa continued to predict the weather well into her 50s and 60s, her gift never dimming. If anything, it grew stronger with age, her predictions becoming even more accurate and detailed. Grant continued to work alongside her, and together they became something of a legend throughout Nebraska and beyond. Scientists came to study them, trying to understand how they could know what they knew, but they left baffled, unable to explain the gift in rational terms. "Some things cannot be explained," Clarissa would say. "They can only be experienced and trusted." In 1920, Grayson and Clarissa celebrated their 31st wedding anniversary. They were both in their 60s now, showing the marks of age, but still healthy and active. They sat on the porch of their small house, holding hands, watching the sun set over the prairie they had loved and worked for so many years. "Do you remember the first time we sat together like this?" Grayson asked. "After I bought you lunch and you agreed to walk with me?" "I remember everything about those early days," Clarissa said. "I remember thinking you were the first person who looked at me like I was just a woman, not a curiosity. I remember falling in love with you so fast it frightened me." "I was frightened too," Grayson admitted. "I'd never felt anything like what I felt for you. It was overwhelming." "And now?" "Now it is comfortable," Grayson said, "like putting on a well-worn coat. It still keeps me warm, but it fits perfectly." Clarissa laughed. "That is not very romantic." "It is the most romantic thing I can think of," Grayson said. "Still being comfortable with you after 31 years, still wanting to sit with you and watch the sunset, still loving you as much as I did that first day. More, actually. The love has grown deeper, stronger, more resilient." "You are right," Clarissa said softly. "That is romantic." They sat in silence as the sky turned orange and pink and purple, the colors reflecting off the clouds in brilliant displays. Clarissa, even after all these years, noted the shapes and patterns, reading the weather for tomorrow out of habit. "Fair weather," she said, "clear and warm." "I trust you, Sirta," Grayson said, and they both smiled at the old, familiar words that had become their private joke, their declaration of love, their way of saying all the things that did not need to be said aloud. In 1925, Grayson fell ill. It started as a cough that would not go away and progressed into something more serious. The doctor diagnosed him with pneumonia, and for several weeks Clarissa nursed him through fever and chills and nights when he could barely breathe. But Grayson was strong, and he fought his way back to health with the same determination he had brought to everything in his life. When he finally recovered, thinner and weaker but alive, Clarissa held him and cried. "I thought I was going to lose you," she said. "I thought the earth was going to take you from me." "Not yet," Grayson said. "I'm not done living. I am not done loving you." He regained his strength slowly, and by the summer he was back to his normal self, able to walk the property and visit with his children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The family had grown so large now that gatherings required careful planning, and the Bar B rang with the voices of multiple generations. On July 15, 1932, exactly 50 years to the day after Grayson had first met Clarissa, they threw a massive party at the Bar B. Everyone came. Children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, old friends, ranch hands past and present. Tables were set up in the yard, groaning under the weight of food. Music played, children ran wild, and Grayson and Clarissa sat in the middle of it all, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love. Grant stood up to make a toast, and the crowd quieted. "My parents," he said, his voice carrying across the gathering, "built something extraordinary. Not just this ranch, though it is certainly impressive. They built a life based on trust and love and believing in things that could not always be explained. My mother has a gift that defies logic, and my father had the wisdom to trust that gift even when it made no sense. From that trust came everything we see here today. So let us raise our glasses to Grayson and Clarissa Blackwell, to 50 years of marriage, to a love that has sustained them and blessed all of us." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, and Grayson and Clarissa stood to acknowledge them, holding hands, tears running down both their faces. That night, alone in their house, after everyone had left, they lay in bed together, exhausted but happy. 50 years, Clarissa said. "I can hardly believe it." "Best 50 years of my life," Grayson said. "Every single day with you has been a gift." "Even the hard days?" "Especially the hard days," Grayson said, "because we faced them together." They fell asleep holding each other, content in the knowledge that they had built something that would last beyond them, a legacy of love and trust and family that would continue for generations. Grayson lived to be 81 years old. He died peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1936 with Clarissa beside him holding his hand. His last words to her were the ones he had said so many times over their 54 years together. "I trust you, more than the sky." Clarissa mourned him deeply, but she did not break. She had their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to sustain her, and she had the comfort of knowing that they had lived a full and beautiful life together. She continued to predict the weather, continued to press her hands to the Nebraska earth, and listen to what it had to say, finding solace in the gift that had brought them together in the first place. She lived for another 12 years, surrounded by family, beloved by everyone who knew her. When she died in 1948 at the age of 91, she was buried beside Grayson on a hill overlooking the Bar B under a sky that was clear and blue and promised fair weather ahead. Their great-great-grandchildren still work the Bar B today, and the gift of weather prediction has passed down through the generations, a reminder of the woman who could feel the rain coming and the cowboy who trusted her more than he trusted the sky. Their love story became legend in Nebraska, a tale told and retold about the power of trust and love and believing in the impossible. And on summer evenings, when the sun sets over the prairie and the clouds gather on the horizon, people still say you can feel the presence of Clarissa and Grayson on that land. Two souls so intertwined that not even death could separate them, watching over the ranch they built and the family they created together.